The Trial of the Seven is one of the best fight scenes in Game of Thrones history, which you may think this statement is plagued with recency bias, but even reading it originally was utterly captivating. So I want to highlight the many brilliant writing, creative, and directorial choices with a deeper analysis, and go into why the Trial of the Seven is so iconic. For the first point, let's tackle one of the hotter topics being discussed right now that I also think is one of this scene's biggest strengths, and that's perspective. The entire scene is told through Dunk's POV. It's meant to purely put you in his headspace, invoking a sense of panic, chaos, and terror. This isn't just an action scene, it's also a horror scene, illustrating that this is Dunk's first time in this type of situation, and since we're binded to Dunk, his state of mind transfers to us, the audience. We're also terrified. The cinematography is limited a lot of the time to his narrow slit, things abruptly smash into Dunk, and the inherent incoherence of where people are in this space adds to the discombobulation. Changing from Dunk's perspective and showing what other people are doing directly severs all of this and changes the tone, because now as a viewer, you have better information and context for what's happening. Dunk doesn't have the luxury of viewing the battlefield with a sweeping wide shot. Narratively, these two styles communicate different things. The Battle of the Bastards is primarily about the overall battle, tracking the story and reactions of multiple characters across the field. Only briefly do you ever attach to and follow a character through a more gritty, harrowing experience. For the Trial of the Seven, this is all about Dunk, not about Rhaemond getting revenge, Lionel Baratheon bloodying up the Kingsguard, or Targaryen brothers brawling and committing kinslaying legally. Dunk is the main focus, and there's an extreme sense of efficacy by not breaking from his POV. That's why the criticism of people wanting to see other characters fight surprises me, because this non-stop adrenaline-fueled journey is what makes this scene so captivating. The only times we do break from Dunk's perspective is to highlight the concern of Egg, since he's the other main character, and when Dunk finally gets his bearings in the end, as it now makes logical sense to witness other people fighting since Dunk is viewing these moments happening himself. Which, as a cool detail, we witness the exact moment where Maekar hits Baelor's head with his mace. Found that pretty neat when rewatching the scene. Another thing that relates to perspective that boosts the immersion is the stellar sound design. I would put this in its own category, but there's already a lot I want to cover, and the sound design further enhances the claustrophobia we feel. Our hearing is muffled, Dunk's breathing is overpowering and constant, and there's multiple sudden cracks from weapons and nearby events that act to stun us. Just as much as the visuals, the sound design really hammers home how suffocating this scene feels. Then, two other details relating to sound that I really liked were the reverb of Sir Arlen's and that warbling to the mud squelching, and the ending with Dunk shouting as if his voice is a booming bass speaker since his hearing is impaired, submerging you in his dire headspace. Then the cut to the lords and the sound being completely normal in comparison is a great contrast. The sound design is very methodical and detailed in this scene, and that paired with staying in Dunk's perspective makes this an absorbing action scene. Similar to how we stay within Dunk's perspective, I think Ira Parker and Owen Harris perfectly showcase Dunk's excruciating character struggle. Bro gets absolutely wrecked in this fight, and as someone who has been very vocal about being displeased with the lack of consequences and injuries for Jon Snow in the Battle of the Bastards, it's incredibly refreshing having someone sustain tangible wounds. A massive aspect that makes action so compelling is how much a character struggles to accomplish their objective. The best way to showcase this is through physical injuries. You're now impairing your character with an obstacle that makes the conflict harder to overcome, increasing the suspense and investment in you wanting to see Dunk rise above this crippling challenge. And the Trial of the Seven opens with a major one, with Dunk flat out getting stuck by a huge wooden shard. Then from there, he sustains even more injuries, but never to a point where you go, that would have killed him. Really, the only times where I was a bit skeptical was after the fact, where Dunk's blood loss would probably be too great to survive, and it looked like Dunk cut Aerian's femoral artery, which would have been a death sentence. But to be fair, there have been far worse examples of characters surviving certain scenarios in the past. Going back to Dunk's character struggle though, you feel every impact. perfect. Even the state of his health tells a story and exemplifies how badly he wants to win due to his sheer perseverance, making you love his character even more. You're cheering alongside him just like Egg. This kind of reminds me of Daredevil, where this form of action highlights a character's vulnerability, pain, and willingness to overcome it. And since Dunk is such a big and strong character, it's plausible for him to be able to physically do this, pushing him to extremes of intolerable agony. Then another ingredient for the secret sauce of making you care deeply about Dunk succeeding is the amount of stakes for this fight. And those have been stacking up throughout the entire show. Starting with Dunk's livelihood being on the line, needing to prove himself as being a worthy knight, and now his life and the lives of 6 other people are on the line. It's impossible to not be 100% invested in this fight, and the fact that that's the case really showcases how great the writing is. On top of that, Dunk has been wronged by a despicable and rotten Targaryen. So not only would Dunk be succeeding in all of his other goals, but he'd be defeating this villain. When originally, due to the show's premise, you probably didn't think there'd be a traditional villain and this would just be a small stakes show about a hedge knight winning a tourney. But yeah, I find it really fascinating how effectively Ira Parker and of course George originally make you feel fully invested in Dunk's drive, and a lot of that is attributed to Dunk's outstanding character. This may be a big surprise to you if you haven't read the book, but the vast majority of what we see in the Trial of the Seven is added exclusively for the show. It originally plays out where Dunk falls off his horse, Aerion comes at him with his Morning Star, Dunk dodges it, and then tackles Aerion to the ground and overcomes him with his strength. The sustained duel that Dunk and Aerion have in the show and the many injuries they receive is all original. And it's kind of ironic seeing some people complain that they wanted even more from this fight, like 90% of it is already an expansion. I think George initially was going for a scene that's more fast and abrupt, like something that flashes by in a chaotic few minutes. You're not going to realistically have long engagements within this kind of context. However, I think Ira Parker strikes a perfect balance where he still preserves this feeling George was going for, while also providing a satisfying fight between Dunk and Aerion. It inherently would be a bit underwhelming to not see that unfold, along with gaining the catharsis of Dunk overcoming a longer and harder, more excruciating fight. Ira Parker is adding multiple gruesome and bloody moments that make you squirm, like Dunk's hand getting impaled and almost losing an eye. These moments, as raised earlier, punctuate the immense struggle Dunk has to go through to win. Pushing past any of these moments gives that triumphant feeling. This, I think, more effectively communicates Dunk's devastating journey. It is a bit different from the book, but between the two, I like the events of the show more. Although saying that is a bit unfair because television is a visual medium. It's hard to sell captivating action in a book because most of the time the text is driven by the character's internal headspace. That's why Ira Parker taking the sequence and expanding on it by increasing the action and elongating Dunk's painstaking journey greatly increases the quality. There are also other changes, like the notable flashback that happens to be in the first third of the sequence. I'm not gonna lie, I was initially annoyed by its placement and at first was like, fuck off, along with it hitting the trope of someone's life flashing before their eyes. But the flashback did grow on me. I like the established through line of Dunk's persistence, where he desperately tries to keep up with Sir Arlen despite a grievous wound. Then the rest of it was unexpectedly pretty metal, Sir Arlen is a menace, and I love the tie-in with Get Up and us suddenly going back into the fight, kind of becoming a motif for Dunk not giving up. Also, the flashback's placement technically works because we never leave Dunk's perspective. We stay with him while he's temporarily unconscious. Another notable change was Dunk seemingly passing out or possibly dying for a brief time, and I'll explore that a bit more in the ambiguous section of the video. But overall, for these changes, all of the additions Ira Parker makes are brilliant, while simultaneously not compromising George's vision. Something that's a bit of a hot topic at the moment that I may dive into in the future. Another thing that Ira Parker executes flawlessly is the spectacle, especially within the budget limitations that the show apparently had. The stunt work is flat out insane. Horses narrowly missing or straight up crashing into actors, people flying off of horses, or people doing literal drive-bys. It's impossible to really tell if and how much VFX is being used here. The dynamic action of the scene is very impressive, on top of there being a decent amount of background action, despite there being a lot of fog, which I think makes this fight rewatchable because you can pick up on new interactions that you may have missed from being focused on Dunk and Arian. Then, one interesting aspect of the visuals I want to talk about is how the scene was shot. The way most people would describe what happens is complete chaos, but the cinematography is actually filmed most of the time through longer takes and wide shots. We're not cutting quickly between close-ups and medium shots. We're holding on sustained wides that I feel more effectively showcase all of the nitty and gritty actions our characters are going through. Them wrestling in the mud looks and is most definitely exhausting. Holding on these moments and letting them breathe in the edit lets the action speak for itself because they're doing all of this for real. You don't need to cheat anything, and they only cut in occasionally to sell when someone is in great pain. To me, this is just perfect editing and cinematography all around. Then, relating to the spectacle of this scene, the atmosphere is immaculate. The usage of fog creates this suffocating and uneasy tone, and it also specifically hides subjects, making the fight between Dunk and Arian feel more intimate, and whenever someone does abruptly cut in, it adds to the chaos. Additionally, the budget of the scene isn't as high as you'd think, and the fog acting as a visual inhibitor not only makes the tone better, but it also allows the creators to save money on budget, where they get to hide most of the common folk and conceal other characters fighting. Now, they are more particular with what they show, and how that interacts with the two main characters. All around, Ira Parker perfectly captures the visual language that the book paints for this scene, and he and Owen Harris definitely elevate it with their creative additions. Going into an aspect of this fight that mostly fell off in the later seasons of Game of Thrones is the realistic usage of armor. It's basically a trope at this point for lazy medieval action scenes where a character will do a vague slash at someone wearing armor and will cut through them effortlessly. The Trial of the Seven very much prioritizes the authenticity of armor and factors that into the choreography. Dunk gets battered around while his helm protects him, blades just barely bite into the skin but not enough to be life-ending injuries, and Dunk takes advantage of his armor by using it to parry the blow of his sword. This makes the fight more interesting. You have to be strategic with where you strike and where the weak points of someone's armor is, like Dunk taking advantage of an opening later and going for Arian's thigh. It's a great detail that boosts the realism of this fight and thus overall makes the action better. Moving along, every action scene needs an air of unpredictability that can instill a sense of surprise and shock for the audience, thus increasing the excitement you derive from the overall scene. This comes in the form of twists and subversions, and every action scene has them whether you notice them or not. Tyrion's betrayal at the Blackwater, Oberyn letting his guard down, the Night King raising the dead. There are many examples, but the two within the Trial of the Seven are excellent. Those are Dunk rising from the brink of death, which I'll talk about in a bit, and the second one is Baelor's tragic death. This was brutal and I think is quite honestly one of George's best moments of writing, very much giving a sense of Shakespearean tragedy. The most noble, honorable, respectful, really any positive adjective works for this man. He's the ideal perfect unicorn of a character to rule the Seven Kingdoms, and thus, his sudden death will be that much more devastating. Especially given the way he dies, standing up for someone who may not even be a knight, all because he portrayed the nobility of what all knights should be. It's a rousing, euphoric moment, almost too good to be true in the dark world of Game of Thrones. This now establishes a partial creeping and scary expectation for George to throw a curveball of a twist in Darien's entire final scene. Something subtly feels off. He's slightly slurring his words together, he makes an odd comment about his fingers feeling like wood, and his helmet is pressed in. The way Ira Parker and originally George unravel each detail slowly ticks up the sense of dread, and during the reveal you're placed in a state of shock. Dunk's triumphant victory is now submerged in moral molasses of depressing complexity. He won, but at the cost of the realm's upcoming and most likely outstanding king. So this not only acts to operate as a major surprise, it also drastically changes the landscape of the world, and it deeply and heavily impacts the characters associated with him, hitting the two major points on the spectrum of a proud victory and a horrifying defeat. leading to what I'd say is one of George's best twists in a fight scene, standing right next to Oberyn's death. Even as someone who read the novella beforehand, I was petrified the second he showed up on screen despite knowing what was coming. The anxiety was overwhelming, and reliving that tragedy again was heartbreaking. Then going into the other subversion, I think the moment of Dunk's supposed death adds a secret layer to this scene, something that gives it even more depth and ambiguity. I've seen it mentioned by some viewers that their interpretation of this moment is that Dunk actually briefly died, and the gods of the faith intervened to bring him back, imbuing him with a surge of energy to defeat Arion. Since if Dunk's cause is true and right, then the gods would theoretically favor him. This of course is one reading of the scene, and it could also be construed that Dunk entered a form of shock before his internal adrenaline kicked in. You could argue that in the past the gods didn't favor Tyrion Lannister for Oberyn's duel, but that specific moment sends Tyrion on a path of colliding with Daenerys Targaryen. And Tyrion inherently operated as a voice of reason for her, tempering her worst impulses, and he ultimately became Hand in the end. So that could also be seen as the gods playing their part. So the reason why I find this moment fascinating is that it's a quick, subtle moment that brings forth a lot of subtext, enriching the themes of honor and heroism, and it gives the topic of whether or not the gods are real more nuance. So this gives us an extra extremely triumphant moment of Dunk rising to the occasion and battling through all the pain to defeat Arion. All in all, the Trial of the Seven was a legendary sequence in the Hedge Knight, and its adaptation goes above and beyond in making it even better. From Ira Parker and Owen Harris giving us a riveting POV rollercoaster, heavily emphasizing Dunk's struggle and the stakes that make you care for him, they expand on the source material and add a lot of great moments. The spectacle and atmosphere was bombastic while still being tense and grounded. The authenticity in how armor was used was meticulously delicious, and the two subversions spice up the narrative perfectly to skyrocket the sequence into being one of the best fights put to screen. I'm looking forward to the end of the show, and stay tuned for my season review. Thanks for watching, and my Letterboxd, Discord, and Patreon links are in the description. Thanks to my persistent and legendary top patron, Logan Farmer.